The House will come to order. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We're not going to adjourn, but just as a housekeeping matter, I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 12 noon, Tuesday, February 17th, 2026.
All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Motions and resolutions.
Niska and Long move to amend the proposed temporary rules of the House for the 94th session as modified by the agreement of House organization dated February 6, 2025. Rule 10.05 is amended to read.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is a way to deal with the issue that we discussed previously on some omnibus bills dealing with what might happen if a member is called away to military service, and trying to ensure that their district would still have some way to be represented in the House. Appreciate the work that House Research and the front desk staff have done on this, and I urge member support.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a common sense way to proceed with members who are deployed overseas. It does not allow for proxy voting, which had been our members' concern previously, but allows for voting by verified electronic means, including by oral recording, which we think is in keeping with our House tradition. And so I'd urge members to support.
All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Conference committee reports.
Conference committee report. Madam Speaker, I hereby announce the Senate has concurred in and adopted the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File Number 3045, an act relating to state government operations. The report is addressed to the Honorable Bobby Joe Champion, President of the Senate, the Honorable Lisa M. Damuth, Speaker of the House of Representatives. We, the undersigned conferees for Senate File Number 3045, report that we've agreed upon the item in dispute and recommend as follows. The report is signed by 4 of the 4 members on the part of the House and 4 of the 5 members on the part of the Senate. Klevorn moves that the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File Number 3045 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, the author, Representative Klevorn, who will explain the report.
Thank you. I move that we adopt the Conference Committee report. And members, we all know the contents of this bill. We've researched it. We've talked about it in our caucuses. But I just want to remind everyone that it does the important things that we have asked of the legislature. We have come here to ensure that government functions for the people, and that's what this bill does. It's important for our side of the aisle that it adequately funds government for appropriate operations, and for your side of the aisle, it holds the growth of government. So it's a good bill, members, and I ask for your support, and then I'll speak more on third reading.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was going to do something of a walkthrough of the bill, but given the brevity of Chair Klevorn's comments, maybe I'll just be brief as well. I think it's been a long session for a lot of people, and it's getting to the wee hours here. So suffice it to say that the elections portion and the campaign finance portion of this bill represents a lot of common sense provisions. There are quite a few provisions from the administration bills that both Chair Quam and I introduced. Happy to answer any questions at this stage or the third reading stage, and perhaps I will say more on third reading as well. So thank you, members. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Further discussion? There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to adopt the Conference Committee report say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
Senate File Number 3045, third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. As my co-chair Klevorn said, this does some fundamental things, but first I want to make sure that as we are in the last night of session that we also recognize that this bill funds our desk staff here. It funds the Chief Sergeant at Arms and their staff there, and that it funds the staff that supports you every single day. There are things in this bill for both sides of the aisle. For my side of the aisle, as Chair Klevorn alluded to, we do some things to control the waste, fraud, and abuse that has been rampant in our state. We have been able to hold the line even in these difficult times of wrapping things up with the Senate. And I will thank my co-chair. I do say this regularly. We do work well together. And we have taken a bill that was one that we wrote, and then it was a bill that we rewrote very quickly as we got joint targets. But thank you very much, members. This is a bill that should get your green vote.
I recognize the member from Goodhue, Representative Altendorf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. I want to thank everyone on the committee as we work through this. This was, I would say we went into this, knowing the session, the House being in the unique position that we are, being tied. We really went into this looking for technical changes on the election side, correcting things, listening to the counties, listening to the people that have stock in elections, and wanted to pass a bipartisan bill. So I am very proud of the work that we did, and we know we had some tough discussions in the committees, but I appreciate the work, appreciate working with Chair Freiberg, and it was a good experience in there. So members, I'm excited to say that we have a bipartisan elections bill, and for that, I'm excited to see our elections have the support this year. Thank you.
Further discussion to the bill. I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Klevorn.
Thank you. And members, it's good to know that we can have serious conversations, we can debate important issues, and we can get a good bill across the finish line. I do want to call out one provision in the bill. It was a provision that I opposed, and I regret opposing for years. Chair Cagle, I see that you're busy doing something else at the moment. Chair Cagle. I want to make a public apology to you. You have, I'm in my 7th year. You have begged me to pass the giant beaver bill. I have refused. This year, because the Science Museum has developed a full curriculum, and based on your work, and you have encouraged them to open their eyes to a fossil that is so important. And for members on our side of the caucus who are very excited about the giant beaver, thank you, Representative Myers, for bringing the bill one more time. So with that, members, vote green.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Her.
Aye.
Her votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 116 ayes and 18 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference, and its title is agreed to.
Point of parliamentary inquiry, Madam Speaker.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Madam Speaker, are there any conference committee reports available at the desk?
There are no conference committee reports at the desk.
Further point of parliamentary inquiry, Madam Speaker.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Madam Speaker, it's been 22 hours, I believe, since a signed spreadsheet agreement on the higher education budget bill was completed, and all Democrats have signed the conference committee report. It's my understanding that it is still missing a couple of signatures. Is it possible in the last hour and a half of session for us to receive those signatures to be able to take up the higher education conference committee?
I am unaware of the status of the signatures on the conference committee report, but I know the Senate has adjourned. So we will be going on to our next motion of business, and that is motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the desk and online. If there is no objection, we will take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail.
Anderson P.E. moves that the rules of the House be so far suspended so that Senate File Number 856 be recalled from the Committee on State Government Finance and Policy, be given its second and third readings, and be placed upon its final passage.
I recognize the member from Washington, Representative Anderson P.E.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is a declaration of urgency on Senate File 856, which was passed 11 days ago in the Senate on a 60-7 vote in the Senate. It's the Office of Inspector General. And as we're ending this first part of the session tonight, I think it's imperative that we take care of the things that have passed the Senate and we haven't acted on already, but things that are so important to all of us, which is the issue of fraud, the issue of fraud in government. Senate File 856, which again was passed overwhelmingly bipartisan 11 days ago in the Senate, sets up an Office of Inspector General for the state of Minnesota, something that's direly needed. And we have spent the last 4 months meeting with the Senate on a bicameral, bipartisan basis, negotiating between the Senate bill and what was originally House File 1. And House File 1 originally set up the Office of the Inspector General within the legislative branch. Senate File 856, of which there is a companion here, but it hasn't gone anywhere, but until now, actually set that up within the executive branch. I'm here to tell you that the caucus on this side is willing to accept the Democrat-led bill in the Senate, accept that language as is, and pass today Senate File 856. The bill in the Senate was authored by Senator Gustafson, Draheim, Kruen, Putnam, and Latz. Was a very, very bipartisan bill. It went through 10 engrossments in the Senate. They met with agencies, every state agency, numerous times to deal with every possible issue that could be out there. And as you all recall, when the governor gave a state of the state, he said, send me an OIG bill and I'll sign it. That's what he said on the floor. And folks, that's what we need to do. We need to send the governor the bipartisan, bicameral OIG bill that passed overwhelmingly in the Senate. Let me give you a little bit of details about the bill if you haven't seen the final that passed. This bill is an independent executive branch authority that has oversight over state government, essentially programs, and what I call providers. So it's the recipients of state funds. And that's where we have seen the fraud. We've seen, just that we know of, almost $1 billion in fraud, just that we know of. And those are dollars that should be going to people who need those dollars. They're dollars for programs that should be going to people to feed people, to provide health care services to legitimate people that need those services, not going to fraudsters in Minnesota. This is something that's not partisan. We all want to fight fraud. We want to get this done. And it shouldn't be partisan here in the House. This is something that should pass. This bill is in the executive branch. Let me read a few quick things about the powers and duties. Conducting investigations, evaluations to prevent fraud and misuse, as we call it. To refer matters for civil, criminal, administrative action to the OIG, Anti-Fraud and Waste Bureau. To recommend policy changes and legislative changes. To publish reports on the completion of audit or investigation. To summarize recommendations. To investigate public or private entities that receive public funds to ensure compliance with state applicable laws. And to submit a report to us and to the executive branch on what's happening. And there are many other things. They also have the ability to seek orders to freeze funds, and we know that that's been an issue. When we know that fraudsters are stealing our taxpayer dollars, they are stealing program dollars, the OIG can seek an order to freeze state funds to that fraudster. So these are important things. And throughout the 4 months of negotiations, bipartisan negotiations on this bill, we determined the best way to do this is for an appointment that's essentially set up like the Legislative Audit Commission, where you have a commission, a bipartisan, 2 members from each branch, so 8 members of the legislature that make recommendations to the governor. And the governor can choose one of those 3 folks that are recommended, or he can choose someone else. And then it has to be confirmed by the Senate with a 2/3 majority. Because we did everything in our power to make this OIG truly independent of the legislature, independent of the executive branch. Because folks, that's been the problem. The OIGs have to have independence. They have to be able to do their job. And they haven't been able to do that so far. And because of that, Minnesota has the worst fraud of any state in the nation. We need to be responsible. Our citizens are demanding this. We have to be responsible, and we have to do something to make sure that the fraud ends, and it ends now. Fraud's expensive. Very expensive. We have spent the entire session trying to cut out billions of dollars in funding. We're fighting now and going into a special session because there's going to be cuts in areas that we care about, and areas that we have seen massive fraud. And that's why we're fighting. And that's wrong. And if we didn't have the kind of fraud, we would have more dollars, and we'd be able to take care of our citizens in the state without ending up the way we're ending up now. It's expensive, and it's wrong. And I ask you to join your colleagues in the Senate, both sides, join them, join the governor's promise that he would sign an OIG bill if we got it passed. They passed it in the Senate. Now, folks, let's pass it in the House. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Klevorn.
Thank you, and I want to start my comments thanking Representative Anderson. I really do want to thank you for your passion, your commitment, and your desire to make sure that state resources go where they're supposed to go and serve the people they're supposed to serve. So I want to just start with that thank you. But I also think for the members of this body who don't really serve on the committees that might be impacted by this particular bill, it's important for people to know that this bill is at final passage on May 8th, was on its 10th engrossment. 10th engrossment. And even after the 10th engrossment, an entire law enforcement division was put on this bill on a floor amendment. This is not a bill that has been well vetted in our body. In our body, Senate File, what is the number? Senate File 856 would have to go to, well, it is in state government now because that's where its companion is, but it would also need to go to Judiciary, Public Safety, Health, Human Services, and Ways and Means. This is not something that we do on the fly, on the floor at, what time is it now? 10:40 in the evening to adopt a bill that has such wide-ranging impact. Today, we spent a great deal of time trying to work out 3 lines in a fraud prevention bill. And Representative Nash held up our bill from 9 o'clock this morning until well after 10 o'clock, trying to get a few lines passed. And you're asking us at this hour to adopt a bill that would allow us to grow government by adding not 1 agency, but 2 agencies, both a law enforcement agency and an inspector general agency. This bill cost, before law enforcement, $11 million. I haven't seen a fiscal note in the House for this. It is a massive undertaking that we need to do in a considered and measured way, and we need to make sure it has all of the appropriate committee stops in the House. But again, I want to thank you for your dedication to this project. I have said to you multiple times, I am happy to work with you on this bill, but it can't come to our committee after deadline. Well, what I said to you, and I want to be honest with everybody on the floor, I cannot, as the co-chair of a committee of jurisdiction, pass a bill where I have no fiscal note and I don't even know if it's in the legislative branch or the executive branch. This bill in our body was not ready for passage, but I am happy to continue the work that we have done collaboratively to try to figure out a solution in the next year. And I will ask for a roll call, please.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing more than 15 hands, there will be a roll call. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members, and thank you, Representative Anderson, for bringing this bill. Members, this is a really important thing to get done this session because we have seen so much fraud in the press, in the fraud committee, in different committees of different jurisdictions, and we are not going to get a handle on it without an enterprise-wide Office of Inspector General. This is the type of agency that most other states have, and Minnesota has never gone down this path. We have tried by burying Inspector General offices within a few of our state agencies, and I think that was a well-intentioned effort, but it has not worked. And although we have Office of Inspector General in a few agencies, including DHS, where we've seen hundreds of millions of fraud, that Office of Inspector General has not either done its job or done its job effectively. And citizens who are severely harmed by losing out on benefits, by not being given the services or giving substandard services, and taxpayers who are footing the bill for overbilling, double billing, fraudulent billing, are being failed by the current Inspector General system that we have in place. And when this bill first came, this is HF1. We have been working on this since day one in the legislature. And when it first came, as Chair Klevorn said, the House version placed the Inspector General office in the House, in the Legislative Commission by the Office of Legislative Auditor, and the Senate version had it in the executive branch, but separate from the governor, as Representative Anderson explained. And as the team, who was incredible, they met every Tuesday night for hours, bipartisan, bicameral. It was an incredible working team that they had working on this throughout session. And then they often met on Fridays as well. So this is not that it's not been vetted. These incredible lawmakers have really put heart and soul into it, worked bipartisanly, including you, Chair Klevorn, Representative Norris, Representative Anderson, and then many in the Senate as well. So this has been worked on with great diligence and great thoughtfulness, and our side has come to believe, as the Senate put in their bill, that it's necessary for the law enforcement power to exist. It has to be in the executive branch, but separated from the governor, as Representative Anderson explained, by how the person is elected, confirmed, or selected, confirmed by 2/3 of the Senate, and that their term is 5 years, so it won't coincide with the governor's term. So there's a lot of independence from the governor, even though the governor gets to appoint. And this is incredibly important, members, because as we've seen with the Office of Legislative Auditor, who does a fantastic job, because they are in the legislative branch, they are limited in their enforcement ability. And so the legislative auditor can make recommendations to agencies, but she cannot require anything of them. She cannot require, as we've heard in Fraud Committee, that agency staff take grants management training, even though it's recommended. She cannot require they stop payment when there's credible allegations of fraud, even though it's recommended. So we've seen that while the OLA does tremendous work, we need to put this in the executive branch so that they can have teeth and actually take enforcement action. Stop payment, require things of agencies, or fire people. You might find it interesting to know this is an example of why the current Office of Inspector General regime, where it's embedded in the agencies, doesn't work. When I was a freshman, there was an overpayment scandal in DHS. And I was a freshman, I was new to all of this, and it was stunning to me that the person who had signed off on the overpayments, who I'm not going to name because she's still an employee, but there's a lot of stories out there, this person not only didn't get fired, this person got promoted to the Office of Inspector General within DHS after the scandal. And more recently, this same person has now moved on from the Office of Inspector General in DHS and is now in the Office of the General Counsel of DHS. Members, we cannot have inspector generals embedded in these agencies where all this fraud is occurring because it's not working. So this bill that has been vetted, has been worked on very thoroughly with a great bipartisan, bicameral working group, needs to be done this session. If we wait till next session, members, who knows how many hundreds of millions of dollars in fraud and people who have not been given services will be harmed. Please acknowledge, members, that this is a huge problem in our state and something we all really, the work has been done. Here we are at the last minute because it couldn't get through the House process, but it got thoroughly vetted in the Senate. And I really encourage the body to help us get this over the finish line so that this work can continue with true enforcement powers. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Wright, Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to address the objection to this process and hearing this bill today that was made by Chair Klevorn. The claim is, as I heard it, that we're rushing this. This isn't the process. This isn't how this is supposed to work. We're supposed to have gone through all these committees in order to vet it our way here in the House. As was mentioned by Chair Robbins, this bill has been very thoroughly vetted over the course of the entire session. To that end, Madam Speaker, I would Representative Panderson, PE, yield to a question.
Representative Anderson will yield. Representative Hudson.
Representative Anderson, can you tell us when you introduced this bill?
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Representative Hudson. Well, the first or second time. The first time it was introduced was first day of session, as originally scheduled, and then it was reintroduced on the first day of session in the second session. So sometime in February, I think, on the 2nd. Thank you.
Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will Representative Anderson continue to yield?
Representative Anderson will continue to yield. Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Anderson, can you tell us what the current status of that bill is? Over the course of all of this discussion, which will be the subject of another question I'm about to ask you, how did that bill make its way through the process and where did it stop? Where is it sitting today?
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Representative Hudson. House File 1 went through, I think, every committee that it needed to go through, 6 or 7, and then went back to State Gov and got stuck there because it was not allowed to move forward as we were negotiating. And then I did a clone, which then went back into Human Services because I had pledged that I would come back. And as I was going through the committees, I was trying to amend the language on that with things that we had agreed to with the Senate. There's a reason the Senate bill's been through 10 engrossments, because we have made it better with each one. And sometimes the Senate bill took the House language, sometimes the House bill, House File 1, took the Senate language, and sometimes it was new language. Every one of our meetings on Tuesday nights, we had nonpartisan staff there, on top of legislators and with some of their own partisan staff. But we had the revisers there, everyone was there, and we were trying to make it good. And so what happened, as many people know, is that the bill, House File 1, just sort of got stuck in State Gov, and we made the changes in the Senate. And so as we continue to negotiate, the Senate went through, I think, probably 20 committees over time, because they went back through and through each time. And the changes that were agreed to were made in Senate File 856. So Senate File 856, as passed, 60-7 in the Senate, was generally agreed to by parties. Thank you.
Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You answered so comprehensively that I don't need to follow up. So I think the interesting thing to note here is that we're talking about a bill that was introduced on the first day of session, a bill that went through multiple committee hearings, that the author, the chief author, was simultaneously having weekly meetings, if not more than one meeting a week, with people from both parties and both chambers, negotiating this thing, vetting it, engrossing it, amending it, and that work stopped in this House for some reason. So if the real concern is, well, we need to vet it, we need to put it through all these committees, why didn't you? Why did it get stuck? That's a question you're going to have to answer. Another question you're going to have to answer is, how is it that the Senate passes this thing 60-7? Democrat-controlled Senate, by the way. Passes this thing. Governor Walz expresses his support for the idea in his State of the State address. And then here we are, all of a sudden, unable to move forward. What changed? Well, I think we might know. It's the one thing that Chair Klevorn mentioned. They amended it to give the OIG law enforcement power. The Senate sent us something with teeth. And as soon as they did, the brakes started to pump. All the excuses started to come out. We saw public comments made from leaders in your party indicating that, oh, suddenly this idea is duplicative, which is objectively false. This creates a new enterprise-wide independent inspector general with the teeth, the power to actually dig in and find out what is happening and actually do something about it. Not just come out with a report, not just come out with a recommendation, but to act in order to set things right. Just today, while we've been here, mere hours ago, KARE 11 came out with a story about, surprise, surprise, another fraud. This one in Crystal. Involves 3 group homes in that city. A quote from the article here, it says, there were some egregious accusations of maltreatment and questions concerning potential fraud. Investigators from the Minnesota Department of Human Services visited Empathy Home Care in Crystal on Monday after, keyword, after, police last week raided the company's 3 group homes operated in the city. The Assistant Crystal Police Chief, Brian Hubbard, said, it came to our attention because we knew we were getting called back to the same residents for the same issues. He says over a 14-month span, they received 452 calls for service. And it goes on to detail the egregious and repetitive abuse and violations, and apparently defrauding the taxpayers. We believe that the company was billing for days when we know the individuals weren't there either because they had been reported as missing or were in a hospital facility. Now, whose job is it to make sure that stuff like this doesn't happen over the course of a 14-month period? Whose job is it to oversee that? Well, it's DHS. It's the Attorney General. Now, we've been told time and time again, oh, we've done so much. This isn't a real problem anymore. We've done so much to fix it. We heard that nonstop from your members in the fraud committee. Well, I'm listening to this agency presentation, and that's why I'm really glad that we passed all these wonderful things in the past. Well, this slipped through. It's obviously not working. So the idea that this is duplicative and therefore we don't have to do it, or that it hasn't been vetted and therefore we don't have to do it, both are objectively false. The real question that you're going to have to answer tomorrow morning is why? Really, why? And you don't have a good answer.
I recognize a member from Wright, Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So it's been really interesting on the Fraud Committee. Every single time we meet, and I wish we could have met every Monday, but of course sometimes there were holidays, and of course we had 3 weeks that we didn't have our colleagues here, so that was difficult. But when we did meet, we had just amazing things come to light. And one of those things is we had somebody from DEED come in and talk a little bit about the fraud that happened with the workers' pay for unemployment insurance. And they were so excited that they have a lot of measures at DEED, and there's a lot of process. So the fraud was actually really low, and they were very proud to talk about how low the fraud was. And they said, we think we only had 1.4% fraud, just 1.44, and that was incredibly low. So I kind of tucked that away in my head. And then we had the AG come, and we talked about Medicaid. And he said, well, we have a Medicaid program in Minnesota that's $20 billion a year. So I thought, well, how much did you prosecute? Well, he didn't know that. He didn't know, how much a year they actually kind of uncovered as fraud and then prosecuted that. But he did know one number. He knew that they clawed back about $10 million a year. So then I started thinking about that, and I said, well, let's just put this into perspective. So if you have a $20 billion a year Medicaid program, and you have an incredibly low fraud rate, according to the UI folks, because they have really great processes. I really appreciate what unemployment insurance does, indeed, in Minnesota. So I kind of took, in fact, I made it even more conservative. I said, what if there's only 1% fraud a year? Just 1%. Okay, I know you can do math in here. That's $200 million. $200 million a year. $200 million a year, and that's just simple math. Okay, so what if that number is outrageous and way too high? Well, maybe it's half that. Just half. $100 million a year. And that's just one program. That's just Medicaid. Okay? Then, I have had so many whistleblower meetings. I've had meetings with Representative Hudson and whistleblowers. I've had meetings with Chair Robbins and whistleblowers. And you know what was the most shocking thing after talking to whistleblower after whistleblower after whistleblower, who were, by the way, state agency frontline workers? And they told me this: we found fraud, we found problems. We told the person in our agency that was supposed to hear that information. And you know what happened to that frontline worker? Do you want to know what happened to them? They got retaliated against. The Inspector General within the DHS, I don't know if they ever heard what they had to say, but the managers in the middle, they had a lot to say. Their jobs were threatened. I was told that they were told that these managers were telling them that if you continue down this road of exposing fraud, you're going to lose your job, we're going to fire you with cause, you can't get unemployment insurance, you're going to lose your insurance, you're not going to get COBRA. And then there was this bizarre story about someone having military friends that were going to do surveillance or something on them and their families. It was bizarre. I have heard all kinds of things from mostly DHS employees, frontline workers. They are begging us to do this bill. The workers within DHS are begging us to do this bill. They are sick and tired of uncovering things and then being told to sit down and shut up or you're going to lose your job. They're being retaliated against, their reputations are being destroyed, and they are terrified of being public. We have been talking to them for months, dozens of them, and they are absolutely and utterly terrified. If we don't get this bill, they will continue to be terrified. The workers that you care so much about, that we care so much about, they are suffering. The people that they're there to serve are suffering because they're not getting the services. You just heard Representative Hudson, and you're going to hear from more, because this is one of the most important bills we could possibly do this session. And I cannot believe that we are being slow-rolled. All of the work has been done in the Senate, and you don't think we've done this before, where we've had a bicameral, bipartisan effort to get something done? Oh, come on, we've done this before. This is a ridiculous thing to say, that we are not going to do this tonight. Ridiculous. Please join us in suspending the rules so we can actually protect the workers of the state of Minnesota. We can protect the poor people that we're supposed to be serving, and their dollars are being stolen from them. And the fraudsters are getting away with it because no one is standing up for the workers of Minnesota, and no one is standing up for the poor people that need the services. Please join us today in suspending the rules.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I got to say, hearing this be one of the last things we take up at 11 p.m. feels on brand for our friends on the other side of the aisle. Because this item is not an item that we need to balance the state budget. and that has been your priorities all session long. Not balancing our state budget, focusing on ways to roll back progress for Minnesota workers, roll back progress for families, and do everything except our job, which is to balance the state budget. And I gotta say, it's very rich to act so outraged that this bill isn't coming to us for this vote. Your leaders could have fought for this in the negotiation, but of course, there were other non-budget items that you really decided to throw down on. Look, this bill that you're bringing forward won't balance the budget. Eliminating health care for undocumented families, that won't balance the budget either. Rolling back paid family medical leave, that's not going to balance our budget. Rolling back earned sick and save time, that's not going to balance our budget.
Madam
Repealing
Speaker.
UI
Madam
for
Speaker,
school
point of
workers, that won't
parliamentary
balance the budget.
State your point of order, or point of parliamentary inquiry.
Madam Speaker, what's the order of business that we're on?
We are on the suspension of the rules for Senate File 856. Representative Howard.
Madam Speaker and Representative Niska, you're absolutely right. We're not actually on an order of business that helps us balance the budget with 1 hour before the session closes. How ridiculous is that? We have a bill that we could be taking up right now to pass our higher education bill to do the work that we're supposed to do, balance our state budget. So give me a break. If you wanted to prioritize this bill, prioritize it. But what we should be doing is balancing the state budget. And so let's just end this charade. Let's vote this down and do our job.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This bill was House File 1. It was the priority of the Republican caucus, and it should be the priority of every Minnesotan to stop fraud in our state government. Stopping fraud absolutely is crucial to our ability to balance this state budget and every state budget in the future. Minnesotans are demanding it from us, and we've heard a lot of happy talk from the governor, from Democrats. And on this issue, on actually getting something done, there are 3 caucuses in the Minnesota legislature that are serious about getting an independent, empowered office of Inspector General. The fact that there might not be a 4th is a shame. It's something that Minnesotans should be paying attention to, and trust me, Minnesotans will know about it. Vote green.
I recognize a member from Wright, Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Howard, how ridiculous is that? You said that we bring this up at this hour. How ridiculous was it the fact that you guys didn't show up for 3 weeks? That is ridiculous.
Madam Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
The House Democrats had the majority.
Madam Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
6 years. 6 years.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
What order of business are we on?
We are on the suspension of rules for Senate File 856. Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to vote in favor of suspending the rules so we can get the work done. We probably would have had our work done had you showed up on time.
Point of order, Madam
again.
Speaker. Point of order, Madam Speaker.
And in closing, Madam
State your
Speaker.
point of...
Mason, Section 101, confining remarks to the subject to debate. Debate must be confined to the question before the body, which is currently suspension of the rules. Thank you.
Members, I want to remind you that the order of business that we are on is the suspension of rules for Senate File 856. Representative McDonald.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I do support the suspending of the rules. Again, we wouldn't be in this position had you folks would have showed up on time in the first place. Now, furthermore, I'll be done with that comment, but it had to be said. The people need to know that. In regards to the waste, fraud, and abuse,
Members.
Madam Speaker.
Members, take your conversations to the alcoves or the retiring room. Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And then the comment is that this hasn't been vetted and we shouldn't vote on this. And it's, we haven't discussed it enough. Do you recall what you did last session when you had a 1,400-page bill come within minutes
Point
of
of
the end of
parliamentary
session
inquiry,
that
Speaker?
you couldn't get online and we had no paper
Point of
or no bills
parliamentary
to
inquiry,
to watch?
Speaker.
And you have the
State your point
audacity
of
to tell us.
parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Speaker. I've asked the body before, but could you please remind us if we are in the 93rd or the 94th legislature in the state of
Members,
Minnesota?
the order of business that we are on is suspension of the rules for Senate File 856. Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's also rules in Mason's rules. You shouldn't be interrupting a legislator when they're making some good points about the topic. Okay, I'll wrap it up because we are ready to vote on this, I hope, and I hope that you folks join us. But as far as the waste, fraud, and abuse, when I first ran 15 years ago, that was the mantra that was on my postcards that I sent out to every voter in Wright County. And really didn't know much about it other than Congressman Emmer, at the time, Representative Tom Emmer, my good friend, did say and mentioned there are some waste, fraud, and abuse. You'll discover it when you go down. The last 6 years, we have seen over $1 billion of this waste, fraud, and abuse. And Minnesotans are sick and tired of it, and I'm sure every one of you are sick and tired of it as well. This AIG position is so important to the taxpayers of Minnesotans, and you, with the authority, as Representative Hudson said, to really claw back this waste, fraud, and abuse that is evident and has been happening. The gravy train that's been happening in this state has to end. Madam Speaker, thank you. Vote yes on this, suspending the rules so we can actually stop the fraudsters stealing our hard-earned money.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And over a decade ago, sitting in a healthcare committee, the auditor presented an audit on a sampling of healthcare expenditures. The fraud was 10%. It's not a single governor. This is across multiple governors. We've had these issues, but 10%. You're saying, oh, it'll cost $11 million. Well, if they're only clawing back $10 million, which is way less than the 1%, even if they did 5%, not the full 10%, we would be making hundreds of millions of dollars of savings to the people. This is about doing it right, and the data in the history shows it hasn't been for decades.
I recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think that if there's anything that we know about this session, it's that this issue of fraud is the most significant and the most important issue that we deal with when we're considering what our state budget should look like. And to the members across the aisle, we're inviting you to be a part of this good work. We're asking you to be a part of this good work. There's 67 members on this Republican side of the aisle, and in order to suspend the rules, we need 23 of you to join us. And this is an open invitation. There are 3 House Democrats that are the authors of this very bill that we're bringing up today. 3 House Democrats. And if we assume that those members support the legislation, that means there's only a need for 20 more members to join with Republican colleagues to pass good, sound, bipartisan legislation to stop the fraud in Minnesota. This is the single most important thing that we can do to stop the fraud. And I have to just give credit where it's due to the incredible bipartisan leaders who were willing to work throughout this session intentionally, outside of committee processes, to meet together in a bipartisan basis, on a bicameral basis, to find the solution that works best for Minnesotans, that works best for our state budget. Because I really don't believe that there's anyone in this chamber that thinks that if we look back over the last 6 years specifically, that you would want to see $100 million per year wasted and going to those who are stealing our public dollars. I don't believe that. I don't believe that about you. I don't. I think that we have taken good steps this session. A number of bills passed today to help stop fraud. And yet we haven't done the biggest, most important, and most significant thing that we still have an opportunity to do. Members, right now, it's 11:12 p.m. And we've been discussing this bill for a little over a half hour. But this bill, members, is 35 pages long. And assuming, members, that we intend to vote on this before midnight, there's an opportunity for every single one of you, if you haven't already, to get up to speed on what this bill does, what this bill will do, and most importantly, how the Office of the Inspector General will help stop the fraud in Minnesota. We have a great opportunity. Let's not miss it. Let's not miss it. This isn't about playing party politics. This isn't about trying to say that one side of the aisle should get the win. Notice today and this week that when we have sought to declare an urgency to suspend the rules, this week we've brought up bills authored by Democrats that we have worked together with you on. But let's finish our work. Let's finish our work with this bill. Let's not leave our work undone and unfinished, especially because of process. Because this bill has had the hearings, this bill has been vetted, the agencies have been consulted, we do know the cost, and frankly, members, for the sake of the budget, the cost of inaction on the Office of the Inspector General is more expensive and more costly to the state than passing this bill. Inaction tonight sets us on a continued perilous course. Do we want our state to continue to make the headlines on a national basis for the largest fraud anywhere in the nation at any time in history? I know that none of us want that. I know because of how passionately members have spoken on this floor, and even more so, how passionately I heard members on the other side of the aisle deliver their case for the public programs in a press conference this afternoon in the basement of this building. If you believe in supporting strong public programs, then we need Senate File 856. And why we need the Office of the Inspector General to ensure strong program integrity throughout all of our state agencies. To have one office that is independent from others, that is independent from the chief executive of the state, that is independent from the legislature, that is independent from the judicial branch, that is focused entirely upon stopping fraud in Minnesota. An office, members, that creates the whistleblower protections and the one-stop shop for Minnesota's public workers to go to stop the waste and abuse and fraud of our tax dollars. Members, tonight, stand for our public workers, stand for program integrity, stand for taxpayers, and help us stop the fraud. I invite you all to vote green with us tonight. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to table the motion to suspend the rules, and I request a roll call.
Representative Freiberg moves to lay the suspension of the rules on the table. A roll call has been requested. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Her.
Yep, vote yes. All right, go ahead. Go ahead.
Her, yes.
Her votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 65 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail. To the suspension of rules. Discussion, Representative Klevorn.
Thank you. And you know, this has been a really interesting conversation for me to listen to tonight. In listening to what I'm hearing, they may not be the exact words, but what I'm hearing is that in our equally divided branch of government, that we, the Democrats, stopped this bill from moving. I would like to remind every member in this body that there are co-chairs of every committee. There are co-vice chairs of every committee. And so I only had the gavel in State Gov 3 times. So to hear that it's stuck in State Gov, and somehow it's the Democrats that blocked the bill from moving. I find that fascinating. The other thing I find fascinating is the idea that we, the House of Representatives, should just hand our authority over because, hey, the Senate did it. We don't have brains. We don't have to think about it. The Senate did it. So we should just take it and accept it. Minnesota does not have a unicameral legislature. We have a bicameral legislature. The other thing that I find fascinating in all of this is that Representative said this evening on the floor that there are 3 Democratic co-authors to this very bill. The companion to this bill is not House File 1. It is a Democrat-led bill that you are saying is so good. But the Democrats are saying this bill is needing to be vetted in our body. We want to have a say also in the content of this bill. We are not prepared to just have our homework written for us. We do our own work. We show up in our committees and we do our work. We don't accept someone else's homework. So with that, members on our side of the aisle, I'm encouraging you to vote against suspension of the rules. I know there are members on the other side of the aisle who do not pass bills without fiscal notes. I know that there are members on the other side of the aisle who expect bills to be vetted fully in their committees. I know that there are chairs on that side of the aisle who expect to have a say in monumental legislation that moves through this body. So I would ask that you not support the suspension of the rules. Members, please vote red.
The member from Blue Earth, Representative Frederick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I remember when we heard this bill in the Human Services Committee. Heard the similar bill, not this bill, Right, we did not hear this bill in Human Services Committee, but as Representative Anderson stated that she introduced it the first time around and then introduced it again, but it wasn't this bill. Hearing statements about how we need to pull the Office of Inspector General out of these agencies. We need to have a true independent agency. That's what we just heard from the other side of the aisle tonight. But when we discussed this topic in the Human Services Committee, there are some interesting questions that were asked about this. One of the questions was asked, can we be an eligible vendor of Medicaid dollars in the state of Minnesota without an OIG within that same department? The answer was no. So pulling the OIG out of the Department of Human Services would make it so the state of Minnesota is no longer an eligible vendor of Medicaid dollars. Here's the second thing that makes this also complicated, is that when we do that, we are no longer eligible for matching funds from the federal government. So we actually lose money as a state by doing this. As Democrats, we're incredibly interested in fighting fraud. We did that. We led on that this year. One of the ways that we did that is changing units of billing from an hour down to 15-minute chunks to try to be more proactive in that. But what I'm going to end with is just saying, when we choose to go after fraud, when we choose to act as Democrats, we do it in constitutional ways, not ways of trying to storm the pedestal up there and act like we're in power when we're not. Vote no.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Joachim.
Sorry, Madam Speaker, I wasn't ready for that. I wanted to just ask a question about the bill that I guess is supposedly before us right now, or trying to be. The section 16 on 32.15, could you tell me what you're repealing?
Representative Joachim, we are on suspension of the rules for House File, Senate File 856. Are you asking someone to yield?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I'm sorry about that. I am asking if Representative Anderson will yield.
Representative Anderson will yield. Representative Joachim.
Thank you. Section 16, what are you repealing?
Thank you, Representative Joachim. So which section are you, which part of 16?
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
Representative Anderson, are you asking a clarifying question of Representative Joachim?
Thank you, I am.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Joachim, which section specifically? Are you asking which agencies or which?
Representative Joachim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Anderson, I'm asking you on lines 32.15 to 32.17, what are you repealing?
Representative Anderson.
Thank you,
Representative
Madam
Anderson.
Speaker. Representative Joachim, this is a section that refers to the MDE OIG, and the entire within MDE, the OIG and several of their duties will be brought into the statewide OIG, the MDE OIG. So all of those parts become part of the new statewide OIG. And that is not the case in the other agencies, and I would love to answer some of the other questions that I heard earlier.
Representative Joachim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yep, I know I've been watching this bill go through the Senate, and that has always been very concerning to me because you see, 2 years ago, we also thought fraud was a very big deal and actually created an office within MDE for an OIG at very little cost. And now I'm just surprised because I'm wondering one more clarifying question because I did not get a chance to see the last fiscal note go through on this.
Are you asking someone to yield?
Well, Representative Anderson, yield.
Representative Anderson will yield. Representative Youakim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Anderson, how many new FTEs are going to be in this overall office of OIG?
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Youakim. I think the number is 34 to start.
Representative Youakim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That seems like quite a lot when we're talking about trying to find 1 or 2 FTEs and agencies to cut right now. 37 seems to be an awful lot. New ones for a bill at 11:30 at night on the last night of session in a sense of urgency when we could have taken up the Higher Ed Conference Committee report. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I don't want to belabor the point, guys. I think that it is really sad that as we sit here and we're going to play politics with this, there are fraudsters. I'll wait for the laughs to subside. There are fraudsters who are watching what we're doing right now, and they're looking to see how we react to the pervasive and systemic fraud that is occurring within our state. And you know what's so sad about it is how they use compassion as a guise for their corruption. You go through the list of corrupt and fraudulent acts here in the state. You got Medicaid, folks who are struggling to pay their bills. You have Feeding Our Future, kids who are starving. You have child care assistance programs coming in at over $100 million. Families that can't get child care for their kids. You have New Way and Frontline Worker Bonus Pay, Evergreen Recovery Inc. See, now we're going to rip off the people that need substance abuse disorder treatments. We should be looking to help them right now. This is about more than just a talking point on a piece of lit. This is about more than just a political talking point when you're out knocking doors trying to get somebody to re-elect you again. This is about taking care of the people who actually need care. What we have going on in the state right now would make the mafia blush, guys. Set aside the partisanship, vote yes, and then we can actually get to the budget deals that Representative Howard was talking about. But this is bipartisan, it's bicameral, it's been vetted well. You have people, really serious legislators on both sides of the aisle that are trying to get something done about this because there are people that rely on these programs that are going without it because of this fraud. Hit the green button and let's move on.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Hicks.
Thank you, Speaker. I would like to ask Representative Anderson to yield, given the comment about wanting to talk about DHS.
Representative Anderson will yield. Representative Hicks.
Thank you so much, Speaker. Representative Anderson, you said you had something you wanted to say in response to the potential federal losing hundreds of millions of dollars in federal match dollars. What would you like to share?
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Hicks. I will, first of all, when I went through the committee both times, as I said, this bill, I will absolutely make sure that we don't lose a dime of federal funding. I said that to you and the other committee members. So I want to, I'll talk about why this went through 10 engrossments as we were changing the language in the Senate because we couldn't do it in the House anymore. But after meeting with them, DHS and every agency, multiple times, after dealing with committee chairs, if you look at 7.4, it says I'm sorry, we'll go up above 7.1 and we'll go all the way down. It says the Department of Human Services has primary responsibility to investigate fraud in the Medicaid program, but the Inspector General has authority to conduct independent investigations to the Medicaid program as necessary, and that's the same in children and families. DHS has 491 employees in their under their Inspector General. 491. Now, some of them don't do things that I would argue are OIG duties, but they are under the Inspector General. Then I want to point to, I think gets to the heart of your question, which is 8.12. Subdivision 4, exceptions for federal funding. This is where we put in the absolute guarantee that that would never happen. It says the Inspector General must not comply with any provision under this section if compliance with a provision would prevent the state from receiving federal financial participation for the Medicaid assistance program or result in a lower level of coverage or reduced access to coverage for medical assistance enrollees. We put a poison pill of our own in the bill so that the feds had to sign off saying that this is okay, which, by the way, other states have an OIG. So this isn't something new. But we actually poison-pilled our own bill to make sure that your concerns, which are all of our concerns, are allied. So it's in here. This is well done, well thought out. 60 votes, 60 to 7 in the Senate. It's what we need. Thank you.
Representative Hicks.
Thank you so much for that explanation. I really enjoying you walking us through it because I think it's really important. It's the same concerns that I had in Human Services because of the federal rules that are in admin rule on the federal level. But here's my question, and I didn't get this answered in committee, and I still don't hear it today. I heard Representative Engen, I heard Representative Hudson, I heard Representative McDonald, I heard everybody talk about Medicaid fraud. And then I heard you stand up and say and I heard Representative Robbins say that it's because DHS's OIG is a problem. And then I heard you stand up and say, but we're not actually moving that. The amount of DHS's budget that is grants is this much compared to the Medicaid spending. If your concern is genuinely Medicaid fraud, then the response to Medicaid fraud is a robust OIG that has the things that it needs to do its job, the ability to stop payments, the ability to recoup quickly, the ability to end enrollment, the ability to pull back and claw back administratively. Those are the things that are in the Human Services bill that is currently stalled. Those are the things we can do on this House floor. Those are the things we can do in this chamber. And I want to do them so badly because there is not a single person on Medicaid who should not be getting high quality, appropriate services. And fraudsters mess that up. But creating a separate agency that cannot actually enforce the Medicaid rules is not going to help people. It is going to create more government, which typically I'm not opposed to, but it is going to create more government that cannot do the thing we are trying to do. And when we are genuinely talking about taking away the services that keep people alive and on the planet because of cuts, we cannot waste a dollar doing anything other than actually finding fraud.
I recognize a member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Well, it's very hard always to follow Representative Hicks, but actually what I have to say really dovetails with what Representative Hicks has said. And that is that it's very easy to say we're all against fraud. Of course we're all against fraud, as she just articulated. Everybody's against fraud. But just by saying that something is anti-fraud does not make it so. In fact, a lot of mischief has been done and is being done in our nation under the guise of government efficiency, getting rid of fraud. And in fact, as we've observed while we've been here in session, our president and Elon Musk, his great buddy, are ripping our government to shreds under the guise of fighting fraud and making things more efficient. And in case you haven't noticed, your president, President Trump, has fired 17 inspectors general throughout the government, illegally, as a matter of fact, because they are put in those positions with some process to keep them from being fired illegally. And starting on January 24th of this year, Trump announced the immediate firing of about 17 inspectors general from various agencies. Agencies all across the government, the Department of Defense, where we all know there is a ton of fraud, the State Department, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Energy, the Department of Transportation.
Madam Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
What order of business are we on?
We are on the suspension of the rules for Senate File 856. Representative Liebling.
Thank you. Wow, when you get interrupted, you know you're hitting a sore point. I love it. Do you want to do it again? Do it again. Dodge says it's about efficiency, and clearly it's not. Under the guise of saying we're fighting fraud, we're being efficient, we're canceling contracts, they are ripping our government to shreds. And just because the Republicans in this body say that they have a bill that's wonderful that's going to stop fraud does not make it so. In fact, it has the same potential to be harmful to our government and to waste additional dollars. And in fact, on this very floor tonight, we passed the state government bill, and in that bill was a provision that was actually worked on by folks in this body, and I know because Representative Nash and Representative Klevorn both asked Chair Scott and I to look at the language to make sure that it was good from the point of view of the Judiciary Committee data, and they worked this language so that they could comfortably put it in their bill knowing it had been vetted. And we have done that throughout this entire session because when you said we want to fight fraud, we said, yeah, let's fight fraud. Let's fight fraud. And we have put lots and lots of provisions in our bills. We did it this year. We did it in the last 2 years. We have been fighting fraud. But you guys want to bring up a bill at the end of session to talk about all this fraud. Well, a lot of damage and a lot of harm can be done under the banner of let's all fight fraud. We've seen Elon Musk do it. We've seen Doge continue to do it. And I'm sure we're going to see a lot more of it. And I hope that you will, I could ask some of you maybe to yield to see if you've complained to your congressman about what's going on. I'm sure you have not. But you should be, because they are ripping our government to shreds, and it's not going to help our state. It's not going to help anybody in Minnesota. It's going to take funds away from people who really need it. It's going to take efficiency away from our government. So please, let's not imitate Elon Musk here in Minnesota. Let's not rip apart our government in the name of saving it. Let's not create inefficiency under the name of making more efficiency. Let's actually do our jobs the way we're supposed to do them and stop trying to claim the mantle of fraud fighter as a political issue because that dog doesn't hunt. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
To the maker of the motion, I recognize Representative Anderson, PE.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for your speech, Representative Liebling. I don't know the line, but I'd like to note that the Inspector General in this bill cannot be fired by the governor without a hearing and without confirmation from both the House and the Senate. We have put everything we could into this bill for checks and balances and to keep this office independent of the legislature and independent of the executive branch. and it's very important. I also want to remind the body, this is a Democrat bill. The authors in the Senate, the chief author is a Democrat. The author in the House is not me on this particular bill. It's Representative Norris is the chief author on this bill. I was the chief author of House File 1. And as we went through our months and months of meetings and negotiations, trying to get the two bills, essentially conferencing them, trying to get them so all 4 caucuses could agree and we could create the absolute best thing we could. In the end, the House agreed, the House Republicans, that it probably was best in the executive branch. And that's why this is a Democrat-authored bill. But to speed it up, we're close to midnight. I ask you to really think about this. This is a bill that your colleagues in the Senate have overwhelmingly endorsed. This is a bill, the OIG concept is what the governor said he would sign when he was here on the House floor. And this is a bill that's bipartisan and bicameral. And it's something that our citizens want and people need. Because people are going to continue to lose faith in government as long as they see the fraud. They're going to continue to demand things like DOJ come in and make cuts because they see the fraud. And if we want to get back their faith, the faith of our citizens, we have to do something and we have to stop. So I ask for a green vote. Members, it's what we should do on the 11:45 on the last night of session. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Her.
Go ahead. Her votes no.
Her votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 70 ayes and 63 nays, the motion does not prevail. Announcements. I recognize a member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There was a reference earlier to about knocking on doors. And one thing I learned long ago when I was door knocking is that you should never leave or stop on the bad door. Shouldn't stop on a bad door. Tomorrow is World Bee Day. And we can choose in the next few days that are going to be very difficult. We can choose to sting each other. We can choose to pollinate with each other. We can cross-pollinate. We can, to make good law, we can work with each other to make good law, or we could make honey. And it's unfortunate. I just think it's unfortunate, Madam Speaker, that we've been choosing to sting each other. And I would ask all of us in these next few days, which are going to be difficult, they're going to be difficult. When we come back, let's try to work on making the honey for our state. Because the stinging might feel good
to do it, but not to receive it. And for those of you who would like to celebrate World Bee Day, I have some awesome stickers and refrigerator magnets.
I am
Thank you.
glad, Representative Hansen, that they are stickers and not real bees in this chamber. Announcements. Representative Niska.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Niska moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails and the House stands adjourned until 12 noon Tuesday, February 17th, 2026.